very amazed every morning with every model release that I see. And I'm like, oh my God. But if we don't use that, then of course, for an average person, this will become a bit of a challenge, which a person is constantly through their curiosity, through their practice and hard work that they're constantly working and so forth, would be one of the most interesting qualities that we would look for when we are hiring such.
AI इतने fast learn कर रहा है, it's growing so quickly. Will we have jobs? Hi everyone, welcome to AI Basics. Today's guest is someone who's been building AI solutions long before AI was the cool buzzword it is today. I'm talking about Anurag Sahay, Managing Director and Global Business Unit Head of AI and Data Sciences at Nagarro. Nagarro isn't just another tech company. It's got over 18,000 experts across 38 countries. They call themselves a nation of Nagarians. It is driving innovation with a simple yet powerful mantra. Caring is our superpower. Anurag's journey is fascinating, from starting with eye-powered eye disease diagnosis in a startup to demand forecasting and recommendations at Big Basket, and now building global AI and data science teams at Nagarro. He's seen AI evolve up close and at scale. So, hi Anurag, welcome to AI Basics. So happy to have you with us. And as always, we give the conclusion first. So, if you had to tell our audience one big takeaway, something that they should remember, what would that one big thing be?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, and it's a joy to talk to you, Suki. There are several things, but clearly the one interesting thing for me is that I constantly think about is how some of these models are now really scaling up to the quality of intelligence that is so surprising and shocking to even practitioners who have been in the areas of AI for a long time. So I'm like, very amazed every morning with every model release that I see, that I kind of play with, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like now it's like a 3 billion parameter model, and it's working at the level of GPT-4o, and 1 week later it's like, oh, so the kinds of shocks about how fast reasoning intelligence is being captured in some of these models is really shocking to me. And how good are they really beginning to become? So I mean, forget the doomsday scenario and the utopia that might come from AI, but notwithstanding that, but just from a practitioner's perspective, the intelligence that is actually being delivered by AI in the form of these models is astounding. And I think that's the one takeaway I would like to sort of share with your audience, that it's really worth exploring and talking and experiencing, because I think it says something about us as well when we interact. Like it surprises me, it shocks me in some ways. It really, really amazes me. So that's the kind of thing I would really say.
Now, the second burning question now, that the one that everybody always asks, because they're so fearful, AI itne fast learn kar raha hai, it's growing so quickly. Will we have jobs, or is it like the utopia that Mark is promising us, or Elon, that we will just sit back and sip pina coladas?
I am no oracle, and frankly, I think even though I work in the areas of AI, and prediction should be one important thing that I should be fairly comfortable with. I'm actually fairly uncomfortable with prediction. I feel like it's very hard to predict some of these things, but maybe a couple of principles that come to mind that I think is really useful to keep in mind, right? On the one hand, our tools are like AI is a tool for not for, and it's a tool which is really developing. It's really growing exponentially in its capability and so forth. But at the same time, our understanding, our ability to handle that tool, our ability to use that tool is also growing. We are not static either. And so to imagine a world where AI will begin to far exceed humanity is a very hard uh, thought process for me. But the potential for upskilling in human beings is equally promising. Actually, in my mind, it's the potential is even more than AI. We have come very far in the tree of evolution to be here to create something like AI. So it creates a pressure, clearly. That pressure is there, but the potential is also there. But if we don't use that, if we don't leverage that potential, then of course, for an average person, this will become a bit of a challenge, in my opinion. So those are the principles, I think. But I'll not make any predictions about what might happen. Very
But
hard.
you have 1,000 people working for you in your team. Now let's get into that. What are those type of people? What are the skills that you are looking at? Because I think people are dying to know, if I need to work in an AI team or if I want to have a job in AI, what are the skills that are the most relevant today?
Clearly, absolutely, and this hasn't changed at all, in my opinion. And I'll just sort of say that it's fairly simple. So I run a team of AI engineers, data scientists, data engineers, big data engineers, and so forth. So this is basically a type of work that engineers do, where they kind of take data out from one system, they run workflows to transform that data. Then they write models, they build models. Some of these models are predictive in nature. Some of them are different types of models. Some of them might be optimization and so forth. And then when it comes to AI, they use these large language models to build all kinds of very interesting applications and so forth. Right? We write agents, we build agents, we deploy them, and so forth. Now, this is the kind of thing that everybody is doing. Now, the capability or the competency that we always are seeking are people with a fairly strong engineering bent of mind. What that means is that they understand the good practices of engineering. That's the foundation, in my opinion, right? Like, they understand how code should be written, how abstractions have to be built, what would be a good abstraction versus what would not be such a good abstraction when you're writing code. So there are some very simple, which we get to learn in school and colleges and so forth when we go through, right? And of course, a lot of practice that comes from participating and experiencing. So good engineering practices are one of the foundations. So in my opinion, after being in this field for close to 15 years, I feel like solid engineering skills, which a person is constantly, through their curiosity, through their practice and hard work, that they're constantly working and so forth, would be one of the most interesting qualities that we would look for when we are hiring such people.
Now you've taken a lot of buzzwords: machine learning, data science, analytics. We hear all of these terms, but they're often confusing. Are they all part of AI? Are they the basis of AI? Are they different? How do these all relate?
So, in the beginning, all we used to do were, like, if we just go back 20 years ago, right? The one of the common things that was the common practice was that people would write things like what we call statistical models. They would use statistics, especially inferential statistics, where they would sort of say, okay, I have a hypothesis, and this is how I would use this. Linear regression used to be one of the very common ways to really solve a problem or even think, right? Like, okay, I have a certain outcome, and this outcome is dependent on these two, three important things. All I need to figure out is how much weight should I give to each one of those two, three things to really create an outcome, right? This is a very standard workflow that we used to do 20 years ago. And this was a model. This is what we used to call a model. It still is a model in some form, right? So this is the original data science. Data science was all about collecting data from wherever, figuring out, okay, which columns are the dependent columns, which columns are independent columns, and then finding a relationship between the two through drawing lines and curves and so forth. Really, right? So this is data science, in my opinion. It still is, but the tools have changed and so forth. Then what happened is that from statistical models, what started happening was machine learning algorithms started coming. This happened in the time window more around 2002, 3 onwards to maybe 15, very, very actively. There were algorithms like decision trees, random forests. I'm just taking these names because these are buzzwords in data science, in data science and machine learning. Everybody would know, but basically they are algorithms. They are very smart algorithms. So instead of just a regression, you could do many interesting ways to really get to predictions. So these kinds of algorithms came by. This is basically machine learning. There is a portfolio of about 10 algorithms, maybe lesser, that people used to use to solve that. Then in the meantime, like while we are saying it's not like suddenly it happened, it had been happening all along. There's a bunch of people who were working on neural networks who are like, oh, I think we should have a mathematical representation of the brain. And the way the brain works is that there are these cells, and these cells are interconnected with each other, and they have something called intensity. And so, depending on the intensity, they trigger something or they don't trigger something. So this is an abstraction of a brain, right? And so this is what we call neural nets. And so this sort of field started beginning to come about really, really in a very nice way, and some very interesting results started happening. Actually, there was a paper in 2012 that came out that was where this particular team built a neural network which really changed the quality of prediction when it came to images. So the images were this data set called the ImageNet data set that came from Stanford. Fei Li was one of the she's one of the people who's now building spatial AI, and her team was the one who curated this data set. And 2012 onwards, suddenly the attention shifted from machine learning algorithms to these neural nets. And how do you do this, right? And in the meantime, Google came with TensorFlow, which is a framework for building neural nets. Facebook came up with PyTorch, and these frameworks started happening. Suddenly started becoming very available. 2012 onwards, the shift from algorithms to neural nets was one of the key things, right? And this is what we call deep learning. And today, a lot of what we call AI is basically techniques of using these neural nets in very interesting and impressive ways to get these outcomes. So now AI is basically the idea of using neural nets to solve problems in very, very interesting ways and all kinds of problems.
Now explain something to us, Anurag, because I mean, I'm actually shocked that maybe ChatGPT only 2.5 years ago. Why this logarithm? I mean, it's just going literally at a log scale.
The scaling laws are behind this thesis, really. And what's the thesis? The thesis is that if I had a large enough neural network, and what's a large enough neural network means I have a lot of compute, basically. Like I have a lot of uh, processors. These are called GPUs,
Yes.
Which are graphical processing units, but basically a processor, right? If I have a large enough compute, which means I have a large enough neural net, and I have a large amount of data, then potentially I can create a very interesting model. And then the scaling laws goes on to say that as I increase the compute, and as I increase the data, the intelligence of the model will proportionately increase. And it will keep on increasing depending on how much compute I keep throwing at it, and the data that I keep throwing at it. Right? So what this means, what does this mean is that today, if I start building these very large networks, and I start collecting a huge amount of data, and I start showing it, and using the right training, start putting it together, I will just keep getting more and more intelligent models and more intelligent models. And there is no limit to what I would get to. And so if you extrapolate that idea, it sort of says, oh, if I keep doing that, I'm going to surpass human beings. I'm going to go beyond human beings eventually when it comes to intelligence. And so this is what is happening in the last 4 or 5 years, ever since GPT came out. It uses this architecture called a transformer architecture, which is basically a very smart way to really process these long sequences. It's just a neural network design architecturally, right? And this is very amenable to scaling. It can really scale. And so this architecture design, combined with a lot of compute and a lot of data and a bunch of very smart people putting it together, is the reason why you're seeing an explosion of intelligence really going through the roof.
Now, Anurag, two questions come to mind. The first one, because I mean, India is GPU constrained, right? Even China was GPU constrained, but they have also, or can they also create these type of models? Because we saw DeepSeek and we said, wow.
Clearly, I mean, we're all so surprised by DeepSeek in Jan, right? Like, it's like, how is that even possible? Like, everybody says it takes huge amounts of money, like, multi-million dollars, and then there is a bunch of people working in some garage shack, are trained a model for $5 million apparently, right? So it was very shocking, but also an eye-opening thing that such things possible, right? Sometimes somebody has to do something to really demonstrate that it's possible. Uh,
Yeah,
before
I guess we're
until that.
hoping for the India story.
And the India story is so important, in my opinion, for India to break out as well. Really, right? Like, how can India quickly break out of this? Interestingly, I mean, I if I can just maybe say a couple of things here. One is that for the longest time, people kept asking this question: should India even build its own model? Like, and I was very surprised. Like, why would anybody even ask such a question? Are people in China really asking that question? I don't think so. Right? They're like, hey, listen, this is an important thing. I mean, it's not like a supply chain thing, right? Like, I mean, China builds everything from A to Z. They will build the nuts and the bolts and the screws and the hammers and the chisels, that all of it, right, to really deliver the whole thing. They don't think partly. They don't think, oh, I'm just going to do this and not the other things. Apparently, we were asking these questions, and I think that's one of the bigger problems I think we have been facing. In my opinion, why we are not even going there, right? But I think it's really important for us to have all of those three things in place for us to really start showing some of those breakthroughs. One is capital.
Yeah.
You really
Money.
need a lot of money, right? Like, I mean,
We've got
without
60 billion going into OpenAI or something. I mean, it's
yeah,
crazy amount of money.
lots of money, and I think that there is maybe, and that's one of the reasons, universities are unable to research when it comes to large language models. You would see most of the research in LLMs and AI today happening in corporate labs like Meta Labs or OpenAI or Anthropic or Google, but not in from universities. Until now, practically all research work used to happen in universities, but not anymore, because universities can't afford such compute at such scale, at such cost, really, right? So it's the big companies which have the money that they can really funnel together, right? So capital is one important ingredient that I think we got to figure out. And like we were talking, like everybody talks about the government, somehow some people are feeling that, hey, listen, maybe the government needs to fund this somewhere to be able to do this. But I kind of see that private companies, which are fairly cash rich in India, could also play a very important
There's a
role.
lot of money. We see
There's
some
a lot of
big
money,
players sitting on a lot of cash.
a lot of cash, right? And if that can happen, then that would be pretty awesome. So India has access. It's not like India doesn't have capital, but how do we really make that money flow into some of these areas, right? So that's one, capital. Then the second important thing is actually people, the kinds of capabilities we really need to be able to build such models. A lot of our people just go out, they do their PhDs and all of that, really, right? But I think India now has a lot of them coming back, and even a lot of homegrown people who are fairly smart. So I don't think that's a problem as much in India anymore. Uh, those two things, I think capital is one of the biggest bottlenecks, in my opinion, why we are not
You
able
had
to get
said
there.
three, so I'm curious, what was the third one?
Yeah, the third one is basically, in my opinion, at some level, the will and the belief that we should be able to do this. We want to do this. We better do it. That kind of a thing. Sometimes I feel that we are too short-term minded, transactional. We just want a quick result. This might not yield a quick result. It might be like 10 years and you get nowhere. I don't know. So it's not like, oh, I'll put some cash in, I'll get a bunch of people. It might or might not work. That's the third thing, right? I mean, I think we got to have a very strong will to develop some of these capabilities in the country, no matter what. And I think that's one of the things that I think we're missing.
You know what your story is reminding me of is our persistence in developing the COVID vaccine. Because some of the questions were the same thing we got asked. Why do we need to develop it? Why does India need to do it? Can India do it? But they showed that if we did not do it, we would
Right.
not be actually able to manage the entire
Absolutely.
situation so well. So I think we can. if we put our mind to it.
I think so. I think so. And this self belief is super, super important for us to really have. Others are doing it, so why are we not developing it ourselves? Really, I think those are the three things that I would sort of say.
Now, coming back to jobs, I looked at your website and I was like, wow, so many jobs are open. I was like, I don't know which one I would apply for. You had roles in Java, data science, cloud computing. So all of these jobs seems relevant, but at the same time, we're talking about jobs disappearing and AI doing the coding. So this was kind of contradictory information for me. How do I take that in?
Yeah, see, in the big scheme of things, it's not. It's actually fairly simple. AI opens up economies. It'll expand GDPs eventually. So I don't know if you saw the latest economic an article in Economist. Very interesting for me to read through. But even if we don't take all of that content, the interesting takeaways were that until 1700s, the world economy was growing at 0.1% per annum. 0.1%. So if you had to double that money, it would take 720 years if I use the rule of 72 or something. So if you put some money in a fixed deposit, 720 years before it'll double, right? So that was how much the world economy was growing until 1700. Industrial Revolution changed that number to 0.5%, and that went on till 1830s, 1850s, and so on. So now suddenly the number was 360 or whatever that number is, right? Years to double. Currently, apparently, we are growing at, if I was to average out all of the economies and so forth, I think about 2% or something. So the world's economy or total output productivity is increasing in 36 years or doubling in 36 years. Apparently, and this is not me framing this, I don't have a basis for this number, but the economist is really saying that apparently in some quarters and in a lot of quarters, people feel that AI is going to change that number to 25%. 25% per annum.
Wow.
That's the speed or the rate at which economies will grow because of AI.
I've
So,
seen Elon refer to this quite a bit. I didn't quite understand it because he's also talking about GDP expansion at such a fast pace.
absolutely. And so even if you take the conservative estimate, maybe take away that number, like it's maybe too high, hyperbole or whatever. Still, like we are talking about economies growing really, really fast. Now, what does that mean? It means that there is going to be way more creativity, way more output, way more everything. So the total quanta of productivity is actually going to increase. But what is happening at the same time is the reason it'll increase is because efficiency is increasing. That is, what it used to take. Again, if you go back to the 1700s, a farmer having to, create 1 kg of rice and the amount of effort they would take versus creating 1 kg of rice today is
Yeah.
significantly lower, right? So efficiencies are going to change completely. And so what we are expecting is that smaller teams today can do the same job that was being done by a much larger team yesterday. So this is an expectation that is going to happen and it should happen. But the overall quanta of productivity is significantly going to change, increase actually. So my thing is that in the bigger scheme of things, there will be more work, more outcomes, more ways to participate. But at the same time, people will be way more efficient than they have ever been. And we can look at it, right? I mean, our efficiency versus our
Yeah,
parents'
yeah.
efficiency. Huge difference, really,
Even
right?
I see my efficiency now within the last 6 months is actually double or triple of what it used to be.
Isn't
Just
it?
with
Right? So,
ChatGPT and using it as a layman, not even as a
yeah.
fairly skilled person. But now, what skills or mindset do you really prioritize in this fast growing age?
The growth mindset. Have you read that
That's also a very old concept.
book? I think we're all figuring it out. I mean, I have no clear answers to say, oh, this is what works or not. But I think not worrying too much about the future. I think the future will be fine. So we should not look at it in a very dystopian way or in the like, oh, everything will be sorted. But the today is really, really important. I think that's where I think the energy needs to go. People should be upskilling themselves. People should be learning these tools. Kids should be using these tools. They must understand the boundaries of where this tool works, where it doesn't work, what is good to use, what is not good to use, which part is my responsibility, which part is the tool's responsibility. All these things have to be figured out, really, right? And I think that's where a lot of effort needs to go today. and then let the chips fall as they might. And my feeling is it'll fall in a very nice place. Uh,
Wow.
yeah,
So
even.
now, Anurag, if you were 17 again, what would you do differently or what would you do the same, gearing up for this new generation?
Oh my God, I'll do so many things differently. It's like, again, if I ask myself the question, right? I mean, what did I do differently at 17 from my dad or from my mom, right? I mean, my dad he used to work in the defense services. He used to work in a factory, and so forth, right? But I did not have the same ambitions. I was a different person. I wanted to go to IIT. I wanted to become an engineer. I wanted to work in Google's and Microsoft and IBM. Those were the aspirations I have, right? Today, if I think about a person in a similar situation as mine, I'm not talking about, there can be many situations. But today, if I was a young teenager, maybe I'd have aspirations to join OpenAI or, work in AI or something like that, really, right? The trajectory is going to be the same, really, right? I mean, I think our abilities to design things, to be able to facilitate and orchestrate solutions is at a totally different league. And I think we need to, I'd be doing the same thing. I have a feeling that I'd probably be wanting to learn computer science. I'd be interested in physics. I'd really enjoy maths, but I would be using a lot of that with AI. Like, I don't think AI is not going to be a partner in all of that learning. So I kind of say I would be doing exactly the same thing. Maybe some things would be different. I can't imagine that, but the fundamental connection is that I would be doing all of that with with a with a friend thinker, which would be AI, which is exactly what I'm doing today, even now, right? Like now, when I think, I'm thinking with AI. I am not like, oh, I this is what the AI says, and I'm kind of like, it's like a, from I have this vague idea. I'll go there. I'll work with AI. I'll flesh it out, and very quickly I'll get to a place where I'd be like, oh, I if I did not have somebody to talk to like this, I might not have gotten there so quickly, right? So I think that's the big difference, in my opinion, just being able to use these tools nicely and powerfully to clearly evolve ourselves.
Now, this question, because I think this is also a fear. AI is coming so fast, so quickly. This question of upskilling. Now, how do you make sure that your teams are constantly upskilled?
Yeah, and that's a very uh, it's one of the challenges that every org is really designing for and figuring out and coming up with answers and solutions. Clearly, you think about the whole process. Uh, the most important thing is inspiration. So the way this works is that uh, inspiration is one of the most enduring ways to get people to upskill. That's one of so you as a leader have to upskill yourself. I think the most responsible person is the leader. They have to upskill themselves, and then people follow. So one important thing is that. The second important thing is availability. You must have some of these things available to people so that they can upskill. And this is where it gets, a little bit like, okay, can they afford it themselves? Will the orgs provide them these resources? How will this all come about? And so you have to think about how do you orchestrate that. But availability is a key question that you have to. And the third important thing is that you have to set goals
Yeah.
or outcomes, really, right? Like, because it's not just going on forever. You've got to see what tangible results are you able to see so that you can iterate and improve upon them eventually, and so forth, right? So I'd say inspiration, availability, outcomes are some of the important ways to really think about how you really motivate, frame, and upskill people in these contexts.
So you call yourself a nation of Nigerians with a global view, with a culture of caring. How does that shape the way that you guys are approaching AI?
I've worked for big companies, Nokia and Microsofts and IBMs and so forth, right? And one of the things that I really struggled working for corporates was the kind of um, like, I wouldn't call it cold, but like everybody just does their work and then they go back and then they stay in their little cubicles, and it's a very work oriented setup. At least that's how it was, how I experienced it in US. Personally, for me, was that when I started working for Nagarro, was that I don't think there were any boundaries like that. Like a person, like I could be interacting with a work colleague, but the friendship, it does not, I have to keep the friendship on the side at some level. And I think this is a unique thing about this company, that, the environment is super friendly. It's like you're almost always with friends. Now, AI is no different. You could sort of translate that, because that those things exist. AI actually makes it way more simpler, right? Like, I mean, imagine talking to your machine, like the way it talks back to you. Like, you don't really know that it's not a human being, right? There's some
Oh,
humanizing
ChatGPT
element
does a
there.
fabulous job. I like
Yeah.
say hello, sorry, can you, because of the way it responds to me. I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
bad just giving it a task now. Now, Anurag, I'm going to ask you this question because I'm all about me, the tiger mom. I've got two 9-year-olds. What's your advice for me as a parent? What should I be doing?
Geez, I'm so unqualified to answer that question.
But you've known me forever, so you can
I've known
answer
you
this
forever.
question.
Absolutely true. No, I have a feeling that you are doing you're probably an awesome mom. You're already doing way more than, many moms would. And so I mean, I really feel that, parents, with people like yourself who are exposed to these technologies, you probably understand a lot because again, this inspiration thing, like probably, you are inspired yourself really, right? And so it's not going to be that, the kids are not going to pick that up from you. They are going to be affected, influenced,
They call
and
my work very boring, by the way.
they call it hurt and warning. Yeah, yeah, but that's a regular parent-child relationship. I don't think there's any child who's like, oh my, unless you're Superman or something, that they'd be like really enthralled with their parents. But my feeling is that silently kids pick up inspiration very, very quickly. Again, I mean, I think inspiration is super important.
No, no, very good. It's good. Like be the role model. Whatever
Be
you
the role model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Anurag, we're going to do a quick rapid fire. Very quick.
Okay.
So first, one word answers, so it's a myth buster round. Will AI replace all jobs?
No.
Do you need a PhD to work in AI?
No.
Is coding the only way to succeed in AI?
No.
Are AI agents already capable of doing 30% of our work?
Barely.
Is India behind or ahead of global players in AI?
On an average, higher.
Awesome. Thank you, Anurag. That was fascinating. Thank you for your insights. That was amazing. So it was great to catch up with you.
Same here. Thank you, Suki.